The empty desk. Mason Reed stared at the empty desk outside his office, a hollow feeling expanding in his chest. 7 years of immaculate organization and predictable routine had vanished overnight. No warning, no explanation, just a resignation letter typed in Garamond font. At least Vanessa had maintained her professionalism to the end, and a desk cleared of personal effects. "Mr. Reed?" The voice of Heather from HR interrupted his thoughts. "I've brought Ms. Chen for her interview." Mason turned, his expression carefully neutral despite the chaos churning inside him. "I wasn't aware I had approved any interviews." Heather's smile tightened. "The board insisted we fast-track replacements. Publishing doesn't stop for staffing crises." The woman beside Heather stepped forward, extending her hand. "Sophia Chen, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Reed." Mason hesitated before accepting her handshake. Her grip was firm, confident, nothing like the tentative touch he'd expected. Sophia Chen was a contradiction to everything Vanessa had been. Where Vanessa had been muted elegance in grayscale suits, Sophia wore a deep burgundy dress with a delicate gold necklace. Where Vanessa's hair had been severely pulled back, Sophia's fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Where Vanessa's expression had been carefully blank, Sophia's dark eyes sparkled with undisguised curiosity. "I haven't approved this position yet," Mason said, dropping her hand. "Actually," Heather interjected, "the board has approved Ms. Chen's temporary placement for 2 weeks. If it's not a fit, we'll reassess." Mason's jaw tightened. "I see." "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," Heather said, retreating before Mason could object further. Sophia didn't seem bothered by his cool reception. "I understand this is unexpected. I promise not to disrupt your workflow while I learn the position." Vanessa had 7 years of institutional knowledge. "That can't be replaced in 2 weeks." "I don't intend to replace her," Sophia said, setting her messenger bag on the empty desk. "But I can help you navigate until you find someone permanent." Mason watched as she unpacked a small potted plant, some green thing with delicate leaves, and placed it beside the computer monitor. It was the first living thing to grace that desk in years. "I prefer a minimalist workspace," he said. Sophia nodded but didn't remove the plant. "Of course. This little one doesn't take up much room, and studies show they improve air quality and reduce stress." "I'm not stressed." Her lips quirked into a small smile. "Of course not." The morning passed in strained efficiency. Mason had to admit Sophia was quick to learn the filing system, the phone protocols, and the calendar management. But she hummed while she worked, a soft, almost imperceptible melody that somehow penetrated the walls of his office. By afternoon, Mason emerged to find her reorganizing the reception area, moving furniture increments that most wouldn't notice. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Feng shui," she replied, not looking up. "The energy was blocked." "The energy," he repeated flatly. "Yes," Sophia said, finally meeting his eyes. "Like yours." Mason felt an unexpected flush of heat rise to his face. "I have a manuscript to review." As he retreated to his office, he heard her call after him, "Your coffee is on your desk. Black with 1 sugar. I noticed that's how you take it." Mason paused, turning back slowly. "How did you know that?" Sophia's expression softened. "I pay attention, Mr. Reed. That's my job." For the first time that day, Mason felt the tight knot in his chest loosen, just a fraction. He nodded once before closing his door, trying to ignore the unfamiliar feeling settling between his ribs, something that felt dangerously like curiosity. At the manuscript. The rain had been falling steadily for 3 days, casting the office in a perpetual twilight that matched Mason's mood. The Sullivan manuscript was proving problematic, filled with beautiful prose but structurally flawed. He'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes when Sophia knocked softly. "The storage company called," she said. "They need access to the archive room tomorrow for the quarterly inspection." Mason nodded absently, still focused on the manuscript. "I'll need your keys," Sophia added, "to let them into the locked section." This caught his attention. "The locked section is off limits, even for scheduled maintenance." Paper cranes. 3 weeks into Sophia's temporary placement, Mason found himself reluctantly adjusting to her presence. The plant on her desk had multiplied, now 3 small pots arranged in what she called harmonious alignment, and somehow his objections had faded each time she added another. "You have the editorial board at 10, Sophia said, appearing in his doorway. "And Daniels called about the Sullivan manuscript, again." Mason rubbed his left wrist, a habit he wasn't aware of until he caught Sophia watching the gesture. "Tell Daniels that rushing me won't improve the quality of my feedback," he replied, reaching for his coffee. Sophia nodded but remained in the doorway. "You haven't eaten since yesterday's lunch meeting." Mason looked up, surprised. "You're tracking my meals now. Only when you forget to have them." She placed a paper bag on his desk. "Nothing fancy. Just a sandwich from the deli downstairs." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of jasmine and the unexpected weight of someone else's concern. At his desk, Mason unwrapped the sandwich and found a small paper crane nestled beside it. The origami was crafted from what appeared to be a page torn from a literary magazine, words about renewal and second chances visible along the folded wings. He was still examining it when his phone buzzed with a text from his sister, Natalie. "Eliza's book is finally out. Thought you should know." Mason set down the paper crane, his appetite suddenly gone. He hadn't spoken Eliza's name in nearly 2 years, not since she'd left him with a half-finished life and a manuscript he couldn't bear to complete. When he emerged for the editorial meeting, he found Sophia folding another crane from a scrap of paper. "Why do you make those?" he asked. Sophia's fingers stilled. "There's an old legend that says if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, you'll be granted a wish." Her eyes met his. "My mother taught me. When things felt impossible, she said creating something beautiful was its own kind of magic." "You believe in that? Magic?" "I believe in intention," she said, setting the completed crane beside her keyboard. "And that small actions accumulate into something meaningful." During the editorial meeting, Mason found himself distracted by the way Sophia took notes, quick, graceful movements of her hand, occasionally tucking a strand of hair behind her ear when deep in concentration. When she caught him watching, she didn't look away, meeting his gaze with quiet curiosity. Later that evening, as most of the office emptied, Mason discovered Sophia still at her desk, reviewing manuscripts from the slush pile, unsolicited works most assistants avoided. "You don't need to stay late," he said, coat draped over his arm. "I know," she replied, not looking up. "But there might be something wonderful hidden in here that everyone else missed." Mason hesitated. "That's not your job." "Maybe not," Sophia said, finally meeting his eyes. "But it's what I love about publishing, finding the stories that need to be told." Something shifted in Mason's chest. "You want to be an editor?" She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Someday. For now, I'm learning from one of the best." The compliment caught him off guard. "I'm demanding." "You're exacting," she corrected. "There's a difference." Mason found himself lingering, reluctant to leave. "Have you eaten?" Sophia blinked, surprised by the question. "Not yet." "There's a Thai place around the corner that stays open late." The words hung between them, neither quite a statement nor a question. Sophia carefully closed the manuscript she'd been reading. "I like Thai food." As they walked together through the quiet office, Mason noticed a photograph on his bookshelf reflected in the glass door, himself and Eliza at a literary award ceremony. He'd forgotten it was there, or perhaps had trained himself not to see it. Sophia followed his gaze but said nothing, her silence more comforting than any words could have been. Outside, the evening air carried the first hint of autumn. As they walked, Sophia kept a respectful distance, yet Mason felt closer to another person than he had in years. "I should tell you," she said suddenly. "I know who Eliza Taylor is. I admired her work before I ever applied for this position." Mason stopped walking. "Is that why you took the job? To get to her through me?" "No," Sophia said, her expression earnest. "I took it because I wanted to work with you. Your editorial eye is legendary." She paused. "But I thought you should know that I know. Secrets have a way of becoming walls." Mason studied her face, searching for deception and finding none. There are no secrets, he said finally. Just stories I don't tell anymore. Sophia nodded, accepting his boundaries without pressing further. As they continued walking, Mason realized she had somehow become someone he might trust with those untold stories, a thought as terrifying as it was exhilarating. I'll handle it myself. Mason returned to his reading, conversation closed. Later that afternoon, he found a steaming cup of tea beside his computer, not his usual coffee. A note in Sophia's neat handwriting read, "For clarity of thought." The caffeine was making your hand shake. He hadn't noticed his hands were shaking. At 6, when most of the staff had departed, Mason headed to the archive room. The oldest manuscripts and correspondence from the publishing house's 60-year history were stored here, along with personal papers from editors past and present, including his own. He unlocked the private section, checking that everything remained undisturbed. The box containing his unfinished manuscript sat where he'd left it 2 years ago, gathering dust alongside the memories he'd tried to bury. Lost in thought, Mason didn't hear Sophia approach until she spoke. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's a water leak in the ceiling near your office." Mason turned, startled. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for you," she replied simply. Her eyes moved past him to the shelves of boxes. "Is this where ideas come to die or to be reborn?" The question struck too close to home. "Both, I suppose." Sophia stepped further into the room, her fingers trailing lightly over box labels. So much potential, waiting for the right moment. "Some moments never come," Mason said, more sharply than intended. Her hand stilled on a box labeled "Read the Distance Between." She looked at him questioningly. "My personal papers," he said. "Not for public consumption." "Of course." She withdrew her hand. "Though sometimes other eyes can see what we've become blind to in our own work." Mason moved between her and the box, suddenly protective. "We should check on that leak." As he ushered her out, locking the door behind them, something in his expression must have revealed more than he intended. "You were writing a novel," Sophia said, not a question, but a realization. Mason didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. The next morning, Mason arrived earlier than usual, hoping for quiet before the day began. He found Sophia already at her desk, reading, not a manuscript from the slush pile, but printed pages he recognized instantly. His manuscript. "Where did you get that?" His voice was dangerously low. Sophia looked up, not with guilt, but with eyes bright with emotion. It was in the shared digital archive. Not the locked room, the regular server. Under Projects in Development. "That's private." "It's brilliant," she countered. "Mason, this is not yours to read." He reached for the pages, but Sophia held them against her chest. "Why did you stop writing it?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "That's none of your business." "You're right," she admitted. "But this story deserves to be finished. It's about healing after loss, something people need to read." Mason felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made him want to retreat behind his carefully constructed walls. "It was a personal project. Nothing more." "It was your heart on the page," Sophia said softly. "I recognize it because I've tried to put mine there too." She finally handed him the manuscript. "Eliza was your co-author, wasn't she?" The name in the air between them made breathing difficult. "Yes. And when she left, the story died with what we were," Mason finished. "Some narratives don't get neat endings, Sophia." She looked at him with such compassion that it almost undid him. "But they can get new beginnings." That evening, Mason found himself reopening the digital file of his manuscript for the first time in years. The cursor blinked at the point where he'd abandoned it, a scene about a man standing at a crossroads, unable to move forward or back. As he read his own words, he heard a soft knock. Sophia stood in his doorway, coat on, ready to leave. "I crossed a line today," she said. "I'm sorry." Mason closed his laptop. "You did. But I'm not sorry I read it." Her gaze was steady. "Some stories find us when we need them most. Yours found me?" "What do you mean?" Sophia hesitated. "My fiancé died 3 years ago. Car accident. Your protagonist's grief. It felt like someone finally understood. The revelation stunned Mason. All this time, he'd assumed her brightness was natural, not hard-won through her own loss. "Sophia, you don't need to say anything," she assured him. "I just wanted you to know why it mattered to me." She turned to leave, then paused. "Whatever you decide about the manuscript, thank you for writing what you did. It made me feel less alone." As she walked away, Mason felt something shift inside him, the first tremor of walls beginning to crumble. After hours. The autumn rain turned to early snow as November pressed on, and something had changed between Mason and Sophia. They moved around each other with a new awareness, like dancers learning the boundaries of shared space. Mason had begun staying later at the office, and Sophia, without comment, adjusted her hours to match his. Their evenings developed a comfortable rhythm. Takeout containers on her desk as they discussed manuscripts, the office empty around them. "This one," Sophia said, holding up a submission from an unknown writer. "There's something here." Mason took the pages, their fingers brushing. Neither acknowledged the contact, though both lingered a moment too long. "The prose needs work," he said, scanning the first page. "But the heart is there," she countered. "Sometimes technical skill can be taught, but authentic voice is rare." Mason looked at her over the manuscript. "Like yours." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. I found your story," he admitted, "in the slush pile. You submitted it under a pseudonym, but I recognized your perspective." He held up a folder she hadn't seen before, the one about the woman who collects other people's discarded dreams. A flush spread across Sophia's cheeks. "That was private." "So was my manuscript," Mason replied, but without anger. "Yet here we are." Sophia fidgeted with her necklace, a small gold pendant she always wore. "Are you going to tell the acquisitions team?" "No," he said, "but I am going to help you revise it." Later that night, as snow fell silently outside the windows, they sat side by side at his desk, poring over her story. Mason found himself acutely aware of her. The jasmine scent of her hair, the warmth of her arm near his, the way her expression changed with each suggestion he offered. "Try this," he said, reaching across her to type an alternative sentence. Their shoulders touched and neither moved away. Sophia turned to look at him, their faces suddenly close. "Why are you helping me?" Mason considered the question. "Because you were right about small actions accumulating into something meaningful." Her eyes dropped to his mouth for the briefest moment before returning to meet his gaze. The air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Mason's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. A text from his sister. "Mom's asking if you're bringing anyone to Thanksgiving this year. Hope that's not a ridiculous question." Sophia moved back slightly, creating distance. "It's getting late." "Yes," Mason agreed, though neither made a move to leave. "I should tell you something," she said finally, her voice careful, "about why I applied for this position specifically." Mason felt a familiar tension return. "I'm listening." "I knew about you before I came here," Sophia began. "Not just professionally." "Because of Eliza's book," Mason guessed. "No," Sophia said, meeting his eyes. "Because of Vanessa." The name hung between them like glass about to shatter. "What about Vanessa?" Mason asked, his voice flat. Sophia took a deep breath. "Vanessa Taylor's my cousin. She's the one who told me about the position opening." Mason stood abruptly, putting physical distance between them. "Your cousin?" "Yes," Sophia confirmed. "We're not close. Haven't been since childhood. But when she decided to leave, she reached out." "Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning?" "Would you have hired me if you knew?" "That's not the point," Mason said, his tone hardening. "You deliberately withheld information." "I didn't want to be dismissed before I had a chance," Sophia said, standing as well. "Vanessa told me you were brilliant but closed off, that you needed someone who wouldn't let you hide from life." "So this was what? A project? Fix the broken editor?" "No," Sophia's voice rose with emotion. "This was me wanting to work with someone whose editorial instincts I respected. Yes, Vanessa suggested it, but everything since has been real." Mason turned away, looking out at the snow-covered city. "Why did she leave? Without a word?" Sophia hesitated. "She was offered her dream job in London." The timing was urgent, and she knew you'd try to make her stay. I deserved better than a typed letter. Yes, Sophia agreed softly. You did. When Mason turned back, his expression was carefully composed. I think we're done for tonight. Sophia gathered her things, hurt visible in every movement. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, I was going to tell you. Tonight, before anything else happened between us. What makes you think anything was going to happen? The question was cruel, and Mason regretted it immediately. Sophia flinched but held his gaze. Because for the first time in years, she said quietly, you started looking at tomorrow instead of yesterday, and so did I. The door closed behind her, leaving Mason alone with the echo of words that hit too close to truth. The next day, Sophia's desk was empty. Not cleared out. Her plant still sat by the monitor, a half-finished paper crane beside it, but she hadn't come in. Mason told himself it was better this way, that boundaries had been re-established. New addition. Mason stood outside Sophia's apartment building, snow collecting on his shoulders, uncertain if he should ring the buzzer. 3 days had passed since their confrontation. 3 days of stifled silence and meaningful absences. She'd called in sick, her voice on the answering machine deliberately professional. He'd responded with equally detached concern, as though they were nothing more than colleagues, as though he hadn't spent every evening since staring at her empty desk. At the paper crane, she'd left unfinished. His finger hovered over her name on the intercom when the door opened. An elderly woman with a small dog emerged, holding the door automatically when she saw him. Are you here for Sophia? She asked, scrutinizing him. She's been playing the same sad song on her piano for days. Mason hesitated. Yes, I'm her boss. The woman gave him a knowing look. Of course you are, dear. 5th floor. The elevator ride gave Mason time to doubt his decision, to rehearse and discard a dozen opening lines. When Sophia opened her door, surprise evident on her face, all his prepared words vanished. Mason. She wore a soft, oversized sweater and leggings, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. You left this unfinished, he said, holding out the paper crane. It seemed important to return it. Sophia accepted it, fingers brushing his. Thank you for coming all this way for origami. I didn't, he admitted. I came because you were right. She stepped back, allowing him inside her apartment, a warm space filled with books, plants, and a small upright piano by the window. Everything about it was quintessentially Sophia, thoughtfully arranged, yet comfortably lived in. About what? She asked, closing the door. About tomorrow being more important than yesterday, Mason said. And about secrets becoming walls. Sophia leaned against the door, studying him. I should have told you about Vanessa from the beginning. Yes, Mason agreed. And I should have asked why she left instead of assuming the worst. Sophia moved to the kitchen, putting on a kettle. Domestic movements that gave them both time to gather thoughts. Have you spoken with her? Mason asked. Yes, Sophia said. She called yesterday. She's doing well in London. Said to tell you she's sorry for how she left. Mason nodded, accepting this small closure. I've been working on the manuscript again. Sophia turned, surprise evident. Really? I realized something, Mason continued, moving closer. The story stalled because I was writing from fear of exploring what comes after loss. But you've been living that answer every day, with your paper cranes and your plants and your belief that there's magic in small intentions. Sophia's eyes glistened. It's not always easy. No, he agreed, now standing directly before her. But it's real. And I want real, Sophia, even when it's complicated or messy or terrifying. The kettle whistled, but neither moved to silence it. What about the professional complications? She asked. I still work for you. Actually, Mason said, I spoke with HR today. There's an assistant editor position opening in the literary fiction department. Your manuscript and editorial notes on the slush pile make a compelling application. Hope flickered across her face. You're serious? Completely, he assured her. Whatever happens between us personally, you deserve that opportunity on your own merit. Sophia reached past him to turn off the kettle, then remained close, the decision to move forward clear in her eyes. "And what exactly is happening between us personally?" Mason reached up, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture he'd watched her make countless times. "A new story, one we write together." When their lips finally met, it felt like both an ending and a beginning, the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Her arms wrapped around his neck as he drew her closer, years of carefully maintained distance dissolving in the warmth between them. Later, as snow continued to fall outside her windows, they sat together on her couch, laptops open side by side, her story and his manuscript both works in progress, both finding new direction. "I have a confession," Sophia said, her head resting against his shoulder. "I lied about something important." Mason tensed slightly. "What's that?" "Vanessa isn't really my cousin," she admitted. "She's my half-sister. We share a father, but we were raised separately. She didn't know about me until we were both adults." Mason processed this revelation. "Why hide that?" "Family complications," Sophia explained. "My father left her mother for mine. There's been tension. We've been trying to build a relationship for years. This job was her olive branch, a way to help me get a foot in the door in publishing." "So she didn't leave because of a job in London?" "Oh, that part's true," Sophia clarified. "But she also left because she thought you needed someone different in your life. Someone who would challenge you rather than just maintain your routines." Mason considered this. "She engineered our meeting." "She created an opportunity," Sophia corrected. "Everything that happened after was real." Mason was quiet for a long moment. "I spent 2 years angry at her for leaving without explanation. Now I find out it was actually a bizarre act of kindness." "Life rarely gives us the neat narrative arcs we want," Sophia said, echoing his words from days earlier. "But sometimes the messy reality is better than anything we could have plotted." Mason closed his laptop and turned to face her fully. "There's one more thing I need to know." "Anything," she promised. "The paper cranes," he said. "What's the wish you're working toward?" Sophia's expression softened. "Originally?" "Publication, success, the usual dreams." She reached up to touch his face. "Now, something much simpler but harder to achieve, which is?" "To be present for each day as it comes," she said. "To fold each moment with intention, whether it brings joy or pain. To create something beautiful from whatever life offers." Mason leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "That sounds like a story worth writing." Outside, the snow continued its silent transformation of the city, covering old paths and creating new ones, each flake a small, ephemeral miracle accumulating into something profound. Inside, 2 people who had learned the language of loss began the careful, hopeful work of translation into something new, a text written not in absence, but in presence. The unfinished paper crane sat on the table beside them, no longer abandoned, but simply waiting for the next fold, the next careful crease that would bring it closer to completion.